Good afternoon and welcome. First, a little bit of housekeeping. Some of the videos we might show today may have flashing images to be aware of. I'm Robin Moore. I'm one of the co-directors of Cluster, which is part of the Creative Industries Clusters programme. We encourage and enable R&D and innovation in the screen and news sectors in South Wales. And we're going to be talking about one of the projects we funded, which is Gruff Rhys Hissing Currents, a project that was looking at reimagining the album release and touring cycle that most musicians have to go through and trying to make it more engaging for their fans. In particular, we'll be talking about an immersive audio experience that was launched for the release of Gruff's recent album, Seeking New Gods. And I'm delighted to say, thanks to the BBC and the record label, we've been able to republish that experience so that you can have a go at it at the end of this session. So we'll be aiming towards that as the session progresses. But before I introduce the panel and we get to hear about the context, how it was built and the impact of that experience, we thought it was good to start with a little teaser. This was made for social media to explain to fans how to use the experience and just gives you an idea of what we're talking about. So we could play the first video, please.
Welcome to the Seeking New Gods immersive surround sound experience. A 360 audio experiment like no other. Listen with friends, family, or alone. In your home, garden, public park, an abandoned shopping mall, an animal sanctuary, or somewhere else. What you need: a Wi-Fi signal, at least 4 devices. How to connect. Select your host device. The website has a QR code. Use this to connect other devices. What happens next? Once connected, arrange your devices in a circle. Step inside. Press play on your host device. You will be surrounded by sound. What if the signal drops out? Hey man, Wi-Fi can be crap. This is an audio experiment. You are a guinea pig. Embrace this unique sonic experience.
So don't worry, the instructions won't be as pacey as that when we get to them towards the end. We will replay that and you'll have the chance to listen to individual tracks or play the whole album. Now I'd like our panel to introduce themselves. I've asked them to say a little bit about their background, but also to give you a recommendation of which track you might want to listen to that particularly uses the immersive quality of this new experience. So if we could kick off with the person without whom there would be no music to listen to. Gruff, could you start us off, please?
Hello, my name is Gruff Rhys. I'm a musician and I'm currently rehearsing. That's my colleague Kliph behind the drums over there. And I've been putting records out over many years and experimenting to varying degrees in quadraphonic sound and 5.1 when that became an available technology on DVD. With my band Super Furry Animals, working with Kian Kiron, we sort of led that technologically, and yeah, so I'm interested in just seeing how technology can push the sound, and innovation in music is usually led by available technology, and so I'm interested in seeking new ways of presenting music, because it'll change my music inevitably. if that makes sense.
Do you want to make a recommendation of which of the tracks that you found particularly interesting in this format?
Yeah. In a way, with this experiment, we took an album I was already working on as a case study with quite varied songs in it. I think the song that maybe works best for this experiment is a song called Distant Snowy Peaks. It's the final song, and it's quite an ambient song. With lots of synthetic loops, so, you know, if I was to, you know, which I hopefully am, you know, going to pursue with this technology, I'd probably base new music around a song similar to Distant Snowy Peaks. You know, I'd take that as a launch pad that sort of works, and then try and push it further.
Great. Ingrid, if you'd like to introduce yourself, please.
Hello, I'm Ingrid Murphy. I'm a principal lecturer at Cardiff Metropolitan University, where I also lead the Fab Create research group, and I'm the cluster named co-investigator working on the Hissing Currents project with Gruff and the team. In my background, I'm also a National Teaching Fellow. I'm a ceramic artist who works with AR, VR, and physical computing to make interactive sound sculptures. That's what I do in my practice. And if I had a song to recommend to listen to, it would be Your Loneliness, because for one reason, to hear a Welshman say the classic line, "Loan me your unholy loneliness," is a thing of real beauty and joy. But also the way the track opens up, I think, is incredible. As it builds, as the track starts, then you get a real understanding of how that immersive sound builds. So that will be my recommendation, but I warn you, you will be humming it for days. And I'd like to pass you now on to John at Francombe.
Thanks very much. Hi everyone, I'm John Francombe. I'm here in very rainy Salford. I work co-leading the audio team at BBC Research and Development, where we work on kind of novel and innovative audio technology to support the broadcast industry. So particularly, I've been working on delivering immersive listening experiences and using multiple devices to do that. You'll hear more about that in this session. My background is in audio quality evaluation as well, so that's something else I have an interest in. The track that I've picked, we didn't coordinate this before, so it's a different one, which I'm quite pleased about, is it's the one called The Keep. And the reason I've gone for that one is because it was the one I very first heard, which was down a kind of ropey Zoom call with Gruff and Kliph and Robin kind of playing around with this technology in the studio. And I just heard kind of bits of this coming over the background of a Zoom call, and I thought, what is this project going to be? Like, how's this going to work? And then it was also the first one that kind of got delivered to me to set up a prototype of the experience. And I started connecting devices in, and it just sounded great. It sounded absolutely massive, really immersive. And I had one of those moments where I thought, okay, like putting all the work into this technology has been worthwhile, because this is a really great listening experience. So yeah, that's why I've gone for that track, but there are others in the album that I love as well. So yeah, that's me. I think I'm passing on to Kliph.
Hiya, I'm Kliph Scurlock. I don't know, just been a music fan since I was in diapers, and a musician ever since I could hold a pair of drumsticks, and I've played in a lot of bands over the years. I was in a band called The Flaming Lips for a long time, who, before I was in the band, made a 4 CD set called Zyreka that was meant to be played on 4 stereos at once. When I was in the band, we tried a thing that I won't say the name of because it's that was meant to be played. It was all on YouTube. It was meant to be played on 12 iPhones at once. I now play with Gruff, and as he showed you around the rehearsal space earlier, we're getting ready to go on tour tomorrow. And I played on the album You Gods, and I did the surround, the multi-channel mix for what you'll be listening to if you do choose to listen to it. Yeah, I don't know, I'm just kind of a nerd, and I love new stuff. If I was to pick one song, I would go with, yeah, what John said. To me, The Keep was one that the way the song was written and performed allowed for a lot of movement, whereas several of the songs I didn't feel allowed movement. It was more to try to set up a mix that sort of made you feel like you were in the room with us when we recorded, like trying to replicate just what it sounded like in that room when we recorded the record. But yeah, the Keep stuff bounces around from speaker to speaker, and it's a lot of fun if you're into that kind of thing, I suppose. Back to you, Robin.
Thank you very much, all. Hopefully you've been inspired by that in terms of what you might listen to. I was surprised there wasn't another vote for. There's an 8-device mix of Distant Snowy Peaks on there as well, which would have been my choice. But I'd like to come to you, Ingrid, please. Could you perhaps talk about your role and Cluster's role in helping Gruff develop this original concept, the wider Hissing Currents project, and how it kind of developed into what we're talking about today?
Absolutely. So I am just to give a bit of context to the role of the co-investigator and how we assist on projects and that. I'm one of 10 co-investigators in Cluster, and they span across the 3 universities. That's University of South Wales, Cardiff University, and Cardiff Metropolitan University. And in fact, it's the first time the universities worked collaboratively all together on a project. And our role is very much that of a critical friend. So as the named academic on the project, you kind of have oversight of the project. Not only might we bring our own expertise, but we're also there for gateways to the other co-I's expertise and any other research expertise within the institutions, but also any resources held within our institutions. So that's sort of our role. In regards to Hissing Currents, it first came to us as a 3-month seed project. So after our first round of projects that Cluster funded, it then very keenly wanted to target sort of smaller companies or freelancers who wouldn't necessarily be applying for research and development. So what we did is we just asked for expressions of interest. That brought in a huge amount of people from sort of around the region. And then we supported that through innovation labs, ideas labs, workshops across 2 days. So people worked with producers and co-investigators with their ideas to kind of develop them into, into proper project applications for seed funding. I think for me, the joy of working with seed projects is that thing that you're frequently working with individuals who may never, or companies who might have not worked in an R&D arena before. And because of the nature of seed funding, you're allowed really to test maybe the feasibility of more speculative ideas. And therefore you have those kind of shorter project timescales, and that can make them really quite dynamic projects to work on. So I think interestingly, in the 107 projects that Cluster has funded to date, which equates to 3 million actual total investment into the industry, 48 of them were seed level projects, of which 20 received further funding. And we're currently looking at ways in securing additional funding for a number of other seed projects. So we hope in the end that over half of the seed funded projects will have gone on to secure additional funding. So as well with that, when we're working with, Hissing Currents is a seed project. It also has a producer. Our producer for this project is Gavin Johnson, and he's been really instrumental in this project as well. And then we also have support in terms of research design, which is provided through PDR, which is a research institute housed within Cardiff Met, part of the Cardiff Met University. And we have a full-time research designer who supports the cluster project. And I'd like to say that the Hissing Currents PDR sessions are the stuff of R&D legend. They are really quite extraordinary sessions. They can spend 3 hours, and literally everything that you could possibly think of gets put on the table, or in lockdown gets put onto a colorful, interactive and rapidly shifting Miro board. And these sessions can really be quite exploratory, or they can be evaluative depending on the stage of the project. But I think they're really good because they help to provide tools for structured conversations, and they allow, a project like Hissing Currents to give rigor to the kind of research process, but also kind of to challenge definitions and help us maybe to identify our riskiest assumptions. Taking a quote from you, Robin, they allow us to fail fast, I think, to succeed quicker in terms of how those sessions work. And for me, I think working as a co-investigator with projects, and I think the nature or the kind of inclusive and transdisciplinary nature of those projects is really important, because when you're working with a transdisciplinary team, it needs to really be non-hierarchical, and there needs to be trust. And I think that's a really important thing, to have that sort of inclusive sense, because you frequently, in projects of this nature, because they're really expensive, people are always working outside their kind of knowledge, the sovereignty of their own knowledge expertise. So I think it's about having confidence and trust in that. And trust, again, because there is, in a lot of this development, an awful lot of IP moving back and forth across the table. So again, trust is really important. And it also allows us to bring in those sessions. We bring in other collaborators. So for Hissing Currents, we brought in Roger Paez, who's a ephemeral architect. At the beginning of the project, we also had input from Francesca Panetta. So it allows us to bring in that external advice and guidance as well as having, as the projects develop, sort of legal one-to-one support with media lawyers, and also business development and commercialization support as the project's near completion. And what was great in that sense is having successfully completed that seed project, Gruff was able to apply for the major project grant. So we're going to move on to talking probably a bit more about that, but I'm going to end with passing on to showing a short film of what was produced at the end of the seed project. If you could roll that, please, that would be great, Val. So thank you.
Gruff Rhys and Partners present Hissing Currents, a portable secular holy mountain experience, a radical spatial temporal framework reinforcing a unique, all-encompassing experience involving music, space, and time. Our proposal is to design an atmosphere rather than a specific space. Based on the core idea of rite of passage, Hissing Currents affects and transforms the audience at a collective and intimate level thanks to an atmosphere generated by multimodal perception, including aural, visual, and kinesthetic, using time, sound, light, fog, fabric, and the audience itself as main design elements. Presented as an absurdist yet earnest secular pilgrimage for contemporary urban nomads, Hissing Currents offers an extended experience stretching before and after Gruff Rhys's live musical performance, using AR and other related technologies connected to smartphones to explore off-site experience. Aligned with the idea of responsive environment, generative art and rule-based creation, decision-making protocols, improvisation, chance, active participation, co-created environment, highly portable and light on its feet. Hissing Currents provides a supple and changing atmosphere for its radical musical experience to thrive. The Hissing Currents project experience will bridge a new album of songs together with an archival and interactive portal that could be a template to a revolutionary new way of artist-centric music sharing. Welcome to Hissing Currents, the sacred mountain of the revolution.
So that was delivered as the seed-funded project report from Hissing Currents. It was definitely the most interesting. I think it's the only video report we've had, and I'm just amazed by the stylized way in which it shows the ambition is quite crazily cool. But what we then moved on to was to how to turn that into a full project and specifically target that aspect of smartphone that was mentioned, and the idea of allowing fans to engage through a number of different devices simultaneously, and how that might be used within the album release cycle. And we were lucky enough then to get to work with BBC R&D, who happen to have a tool that's been used for radio drama in the past. And so I'd like to pass to John, perhaps to tell us a bit about the audio orchestrator tool and how it was used and how it developed through this project.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Robin. So yeah, as I said at the start, one of our responsibilities in the audio team at R&D is to think about novel sound reproduction technologies, and we look at interactive elements, personalizable, accessible elements, and immersive elements as well. I guess this tool that I'm going to be talking about today, Audio Orchestrator, brings together a lot of that. And really the idea came from trying to being a public service broadcaster, and then trying to deliver great listening experiences to more people than we can do with just those who have 5.1 surround sound systems at home, for example. So we kind of started with this idea that in the audio world, we're actually quite good at creating immersive audio experiences when we've got lots of loudspeakers and they're all positioned in very carefully controlled places, and they're all plugged in and they're high quality loudspeakers, like you can see in that image there. We're quite good at creating immersive experiences then, but that looks so little like someone's actual home living space that it's not really a feasible way of doing that in the real world. But we started thinking that these days, actually, in the living space, there are more and more devices that are capable of reproducing sound, and they're probably connected to some kind of network, or often the internet. So we've got things like mobile phones, tablets, laptops, smart speakers, games consoles, Bluetooth speakers, Internet of Things devices. And we started playing around with this idea of, if we could connect all of these devices together and get them to talk to each other and to be able to play audio in sync with each other, could we use them as some kind of immersive audio system? And that's an idea that we started playing around with in a research project called S3A, Future Spatial Audio, with BBC R&D and universities of Salford, Surrey and Southampton. And kind of developed and grew the idea through trial productions and some perceptual experiments and listening tests, and got positive results at each stage of that work until we got to the point where we could make productions that can play across these devices, but it was a lot of effort to do. It was very slow to develop them and required a lot of manual work. So we designed and developed a production tool to hopefully kind of abstract away the hard technical things about pairing devices and synchronizing them and presenting that to the user, so that people who wanted to produce content in this way could just do that with the audio assets they already had. And we invented a software tool called Audio Orchestrator. So I've just got a short video that introduces that tool. If we could play that now, that would be great.
What if you could take the ordinary devices around you and turn them into connected speakers? What if you could break up every bit of sound and decide where and how they play out? And And what if you could sync all this up and connect people in real time? What would you make? What about an immersive forest fairy tale where you can feel the monster as it breathes down your neck? Or being lost in space, wandering on the surface of the moon? Or you could just stay at home, but add on the crowd. What about giving people different parts of the same story and making them work together to solve a mystery? And what would you do if you could connect two people? Oh. Or what about thousands? With Audio Orchestrator, you can create immersive spatial audio experiences. Add interaction to give control, or take it away. And let people join in with the devices they have. What are you going to make?
So hopefully that gives you an idea of the kind of things that you can do with Audio Orchestrator. If we go back to the slides, if I introduce the workflow very quickly, the idea is that you build your audio in however you'd normally do that. So kind of using the digital audio workstation that you'd normally work in, put together an audio project, and then export the individual stems or audio objects that form that audio project and import them into Artool Audio Orchestrator. And so inside Artool, you can set up different rules that describe how those sounds should be sent to the different devices that connect. And we've tried to make it, we tried to hit a balance between something that's usable, but also really flexible and powerful, and it works if you've got, so we need to set up rules that mean that the experience works if you have one device, or it works if you have 10 devices connected, and we give the producer control over how the audio is distributed in that flexible case. So it's, there's different levels of complexity that can be achieved there. And once you're happy with the way you've set that up, you can export it into a template web application that handles all of the things like pairing mobile devices together and rendering the audio out. There's a little bit more detail on the next slide about exactly how that works inside Audio Orchestrator. So we have various different tabs, so we can have sequences, different parts of the audio that flow onto each other. In the Seeking New Gods project, that was the different tracks from the album with sequences that you could move between. We have controls where the listener can actually give us some kind of feedback or make some choice, and we can link that up to how the audio is allocated. We can add behaviors, as I described, that say where the audio objects should go. And you can kind of monitor your experience, change how the app looks, and then preview or export that to enable others to use it. And so we built this application so that we could more quickly trial the idea of using connected devices to make immersive interactive audio experiences. And we've built various different pilots over the last couple of years. There are just a few examples on this slide. The first, Monster, which we worked with Robin on, is an immersive horror audio drama that we extend that with some flashing lighting effects. We said, please turn your lights off, and we have flashing lights, and my slides have jumped. We have flashing lights and sounds coming out of the devices and some different horror imagery as well. The Pick Apart experience was a collaboration with the BBC Philharmonic Orchestra, who had some recordings of, for example, a string quartet, where you could either just listen to it as a normal stereo piece, or you could connect a device and pull out the violin or pull out the cello and put those around you in space, or listen more carefully to what that one instrument was doing. And we've seen some really nice benefits for people being able to learn about classical music through using that kind of experience. And then the Seeking New Gods project with Gruff and the team, where we have a really immersive version of this experience for multiple devices. So I'll just try to get to the right slide here. really, when it came to creating Seeking New Gods, we kind of passed the tool over to Gruff and Kliph and Robin, and they experimented with it and set up all of the behaviour authoring and did the mixes. And at BBC R&D, we provided a bit of support on that, technical support, and also developments in the prototype application. So, for example, we realised that really you don't get a good experience with this unless you've connected a couple of devices. And so we implemented some features where listeners couldn't move on unless they'd connected one device or even more devices in the case of the bonus track. And then probably the main development that we put in place for this project was building a listening party version of this. So we had the idea that we could launch the piece and have multiple people listening at the same time, which has worked quite well in lockdown as a thing that people have enjoyed doing. But having a multi-device version of the listening party added extra layers of complexity on top of that. So we had to develop a way of doing that. And what we did is built a version of the application that you could join as normal. And then once you'd started, you'd either see a countdown timer, and whilst that countdown timer was going, you'd hear Lauren Laverne, who was introducing this piece, talking about what you'd experience if you connected some devices and waited till the start time, or if you joined after the party had started. As you see on this slide, you can see a join the party button, which would kind of jump you to the live position that the album was playing. So people were listening in sync. And that's the same as you can see the kind of playing interface in the far right picture, where if you had paused or weren't in sync with other listeners, you could click a jump to live button and jump to the live version of the listening party. So yeah, that's what we built. I think I'll pass back to you, Robin, at that point.
Thank you very much, John. And I'd say it's been fantastic working with that team. Now, clearly, they had to have music to work with, and the poor person who had to spend a lot of trial and error trying to work out how to get the mixes to work in this tool was Kliph. So, Kliph, it'd be really interesting to have your thoughts about how you approach using a new technology like this and how you think it turned out.
Well, I mean, it was, I'm always, I love trying, I love technology. So I was very excited to get to play with this thing. And I was really excited to try and mix the record to be experienced differently than just, your normal stereo mix that you always do. We thought just because Gruff and I had tried some experiments, and the Wi-Fi wasn't always great, so we couldn't connect too many devices up sometimes. So we decided, just for this being sort of a trial thing, to just keep it to 4 channels, except for Distant Snowy Peaks, which is 8. And yeah, I don't know, the approach, I guess, was different for each song. I didn't want to just make a complete novelty of it. I wanted, I love Gruff's music, which is, and so to me, the songs were still the most important thing to come across. And so I think, like I said in my introduction, some songs just seemed to me to want to be, just kind of I tried to make it seem like you were in the room with us while we were recording. And then there were other songs that have more movement and would allow for more jumping between channels. Yeah, did I answer the question, or did I just go off on a weird tangent?
No, that's great. Thanks a lot, Kliph. And just coming back to you then, Gruff, kind of as a musician, I'm wondering what attracted you to the tool. and whether what we ended up with turned out and had the impact that you were hoping for.
Yeah, I like it for a few reasons that have maybe been touched on a little already, in that it's not an exclusive technology. I think it's very accessible. If you know people with smartphones, or a computer pad used in school or something, or I think it's a technology that's where you can piece together a surround sound system. That's not prohibitive by an astronomically expensive home system, and I was really, pleasantly surprised that even at the low volume, comparatively low volume of phones, how well it worked, and in terms of the timing, and not particularly good Wi-Fi. It seemed to be very, wasn't prohibitive technically. It was extremely simple to piece together, and and really worked beyond anything I'd imagined, really. And yeah, I suppose what's interesting for me now is to try and take the things that worked well and maybe push it to. I'm sure the technology is capable of much more, in terms of using multiple devices in live events, for example. So that, it's a technology to be very much interested in exploring further.
And I assume you sound pretty happy with the impact for you as a listener, when you actually get in the room with it. But did it work for you, do you think, in terms of the way you're imagining you're changing your music in the future and how your fan base respond to it?
Yeah, it's I think we've talked about songs like The Keep and Distant Snowy Peaks, where it took a life of its own, and it's in that sense, it could affect the technology itself, could lead where my music goes, which I think is interesting.
Okay, if I could just come back to you, John. I'm interested in how it was received by the audience, actually, through the BBC, and also the listening parties, particularly as a concept, which we developed during the project.
Yeah, the listening party seemed to go down really well. We shared the app with a kind of Twitter hashtag for people to talk about that, and got some really nice feedback on that. People sharing pictures of connecting their devices together and saying, "Oh, this is it's like I'm there listening to the album live." Or and remember, this was released when people were quite restricted in what they could do. So this kind of experience, bringing it into the home, was really, really very valuable there, I think. So yeah, we got some nice feedback from Twitter, and then I think you can see there on the screen some statistics from the evaluation that we get from the BBC Taster platform where we launched this. We saw kind of nearly 2,000 people trying it and getting a really high average rating, pushing up towards that 5-star point. And getting good feedback that the listening parties, that kind of collaborative aspect of listening to music is something that people are really keen on. 90% of people saying that they'd really like to do that kind of listening party again. And 94% of people saying that they'd be really keen to use multiple devices again for listening to something as well, which is a positive thing for us to learn. And we got some feedback on the types of things that people liked about it. So being more immersed was great. Obviously, the music's a real draw here as well.
Great, thank you very much, John, and thank you all, really. I've got one final quick question that I'll put to all of you in a couple of sentences, maybe. Looking to the future, what do you think the next development should be to take this experience forward? So beyond just the immersive audio experience and multi-device, and thinking about the wider Hissing Currents project, where do you think it should go next? Perhaps Ingrid, if we could start with you.
Yeah, I think in terms of the development, I mean, I've had the joy of listening to this in very diverse spaces, and I think that's something that's really interesting, is the kind of spatial and site-specific element of it and how that can be developed in the kind of part of the larger Hissing Currents, but also in the pre or post collective experiences of a gig or a tour. And I suppose that's something I'd like to see, how it can be developed in that way, linked specifically to site and space. Oh, you're muted.
John, would you like to go next?
Yeah, sure. So for me, trials like this are super useful for kind of validating the concept that we've been working on for a while. And it's the reason why we made this tool. And that reminds me, I should have said the tool Audio Orchestrator is freely available for people to access and use. By the way, we make that available through the BBC's MakerBox platform. So feel free to dig in and start trying stuff yourself. But it's great to get these kind of positive experiences. And the next step for me is like working really hard on making it something that we can do more at scale. So less as a kind of one-off trial, but something that might work repeatably for BBC broadcast content. Yeah, that's my next challenge.
And Kliph?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see this thing. Yeah, I mean, it's just such an amazing thing, and there are so many. I feel like barely scratched the surface with what it can do doing the multi-channel mix of the album. I would love to, yeah, see what could be done in a live concert setting. Maybe make an album specifically just with this in mind. I mean, that it seems like the only limit to it is your imagination. So yeah, I think it's a cool thing, and I look forward to using it more in the future.
Great. And last but not least, Gruff, what's in the future for you in terms of this project?
Like Kliph mentioned, we'd like to try out this technology amongst others in a live event that's pandemic proof as well, that could be accessed from home. And in that sense, travel proof, that maybe, reduces people's carbon usage. Maybe not all events need to be visited physically, and then that if there's any legacy or technological residue by making these portals, for example, that we try cooperative models, for example, in music. There's a lot of problems at the moment with corporations cutting out musicians. So if we're talking to various producers about, making an event, for example, and to just try to think of different ways of different models of streaming that's less extractive as well. So lots going on, but mostly a live event and music. Music is what I think of, but I think there may be some residue from it that could be useful for other people as well, that they could just use.
Great, thank you very much, Griff. And I think it is over to those people now to see what they think of the experience. So we're posting a link to the app in the chat. There'll also be a link to the wider tool that John mentioned, and so there are 2 links there. But the link to the cluster website has on it how to try the experience now. It is worth getting a few devices. We did want to make sure that the listening quality was good, so you do have to have at least 3 devices to try the experience, but it should work with lots of different ones. We do suggest as well that you use the calibration option, particularly if you're using devices from different manufacturers. Although actually we've been surprised how well it works whatever, really. So we're going to play a longer version of the teaser video at the end now as to leave you with, because it has some longer form instructions that will help you set up your environment. And please, I really hope that you enjoy listening to Seeking You Gods. And I'd like to thank all of the panel for their contribution, and thank you very much for watching. If you play the last video, please.
Welcome to the Seeking New Gods immersive surround sound experience. A 360 audio experiment like no other. Listen with friends, family, or alone, in your home, garden, public park, an abandoned shopping mall, an animal sanctuary, or somewhere else. What you need, ideally 4 or more devices: a desktop computer, a laptop, a smartphone, etc., or any combination of the above. How to connect: select your host device. The website has a QR code. Use this to connect other devices. You can use the calibration button to synchronize your devices. What happens next? Once connected, arrange your devices in a circle around your chosen space. Step inside. Press play on your host device. You will be surrounded by sound. For optimum experience, don't let your devices go to sleep. What if the signal drops out? Hey man, Wi-Fi can be crap. This is an audio experiment. You are a guinea pig. Embrace this unique, sonic experience that will bond you and your friends or pets for life.